Sometimes the most important moment of your life arrives so quietly, you almost miss it. Not with thunder, not with a voice from the sky, not with some dramatic, movie-like miracle. Just silence. And that can be confusing, because many of us grew up believing that awakening must feel like lightning striking the soul, like a sudden revelation, like falling to your knees and crying, "Everything has changed." We were taught to expect fireworks, but real transformation rarely announces itself that way. It slips in like dawn. Have you ever noticed how the morning actually begins? There is no sound when the sun rises, no trumpet, no alarm from the heavens. Yet somehow, the entire sky changes color. Black becomes blue, blue becomes gold, and before you even realize what happened, the world is new. That's how awakening really happens. Quietly, softly, almost invisibly. And if you're not paying attention, you'll think nothing happened at all. I want you to imagine something with me. Picture an older lake at sunrise. The surface is still. No wind, no boats, no movement. The water is so calm that it becomes a mirror. The trees, the clouds, the light, everything reflects perfectly. Now imagine throwing stones into that lake all day long. Ripples, noise, distortion. The reflection disappears. The sky didn't change. The water did. And in many ways, that lake is your mind. For most of our lives, we keep throwing stones into ourselves. Thoughts, worries, regrets, news, arguments, endless mental noise. We keep disturbing our own surface. And then we say, why can't I see clearly? Why don't I feel connected? Why doesn't God, or peace, or love show up for me? But the truth is almost embarrassingly simple. Nothing is missing. We just haven't stopped stirring the water. I've spoken with so many people over the years, especially those who are a little older, a little wiser, who've lived long enough to see success, loss, family, heartbreak, retirement, health scares, and they often tell me the same thing. They say, I thought awakening would be bigger than this. And what they mean is, they expected something dramatic. Instead, what they got was something subtle. They noticed they didn't react as quickly anymore. They noticed they weren't as angry. They noticed they could sit alone without feeling lonely. They started enjoying the sound of birds, or the way light falls through the kitchen window in the early morning. Nothing spectacular, just gentle peace. And at first, they thought, that's it? But yes, that's it. Because awakening isn't an explosion. It's a relaxation. It's not becoming someone new. It's finally stopping the fight with who you already are. You see, the ego loves noise. The ego wants effort, struggle, achievement. It wants to climb mountains and collect titles and prove something to the world. The ego says, push harder, fix yourself, become better, become spiritual, try more. But consciousness, your deeper nature, whispers something completely different. It says, you can rest now. And for many of us, that feels almost uncomfortable. Resting feels irresponsible. Slowing down feels lazy. Being still feels unproductive. So we keep searching. Another book, another technique, another seminar, another way to force enlightenment. But trying to force awakening is like trying to smooth water with your hands. The more you try, the more ripples you create. Real clarity comes when you stop touching the water altogether. Even modern physics hints at this in a beautiful way. At the deepest level of reality, beneath atoms, beneath particles, there is a field, a quiet field of pure potential. Scientists sometimes call it the quantum field. It doesn't shout, it doesn't rush. Yet from that silent field, everything is born. Stars, oceans, your body, your thoughts, all of it emerging from stillness. Isn't that fascinating? Creation itself comes from silence. So why do we think our own inner rebirth must come from noise? Maybe your life doesn't need more effort. Maybe it needs more space. Space to breathe, space to feel, space to simply sit in your chair with a warm cup of tea and watch the afternoon light move across the floor without needing anything to happen. Because something is happening. Your nervous system softens, your thoughts slow down, your heart opens, your frequency, your energy begins to settle into coherence. And when you settle, life begins to meet you differently. Not because you forced the world to change, but because you stopped resisting it. It's like a river. When a river flows naturally, it reaches the ocean effortlessly. But if the river tried to flow uphill, straining and fighting, it would exhaust itself and go nowhere. Many of us have been trying to flow uphill our whole lives, trying to control everything, trying to outsmart life, trying to earn peace. But peace isn't something you earn. It's what remains when you stop fighting the current. So if you're waiting for some grand spiritual event, if you're waiting for angels or visions or a dramatic sign that you've finally made it, you might overlook the most sacred moment of all. This one, right now. The quiet breath moving in your chest, the simple awareness that you're here, the gentle sense of being alive without needing to explain it. That is the doorway. Awakening isn't something you hear with your ears. It's something you feel when the inner noise finally fades. And in that stillness, you don't become extraordinary. You become natural. You become real. You become yourself before the world told you who to be. And strangely enough, that simple, quiet return is the greatest miracle of all. 1. The world teaches us to chase explosions, but the soul only whispers. There was a time in my life when I honestly believed that anything important had to arrive with noise, with applause, with some dramatic turning point that everyone could see and point to and say, that's when everything changed. I believed this because the world trained me that way, the same way it trained you, the same way it trained all of us who grew up measuring life through achievements, headlines, and big, visible victories. We were taught to celebrate the loud moments, the promotion, the award, the breakthrough, the dramatic comeback story. Everything valuable had to look impressive from the outside. Modern culture worships the spectacular. It worships the before and after transformation, the sudden miracle, the overnight success. Even spirituality has been dressed up the same way, marketed like some shining event where angels sing and the sky splits open and suddenly you become a completely different person. So naturally, we start believing awakening must be like that too. We imagine some emotional explosion, some cosmic lightning strike, some overwhelming experience where we cry for hours and feel the universe pouring through our veins. And when that doesn't happen, we quietly think something is wrong with us. We think maybe we're not spiritual enough. Maybe we're not trying hard enough. Maybe we missed our chance. But after walking through enough years, after losing things I thought I couldn't live without, after sitting alone in hospital rooms and empty houses, and long nights where sleep wouldn't come, I began to notice something that nobody had ever told me. The most life-changing moments of my life never made any noise. Not one of them. When I truly forgave someone, there was no thunder. When I finally accepted myself, there was no music swelling in the background. When peace first touched my heart, it didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for decades. Just a soft exhale. That was it. And yet that soft exhale changed everything. The world says, look for the explosion. But the soul has never shouted. It has always whispered, very gently, very patiently, like an old friend sitting beside you on a wooden porch at sunset, not trying to convince you of anything, just speaking truth in the simplest possible way. Because your higher consciousness doesn't need drama. Only the ego does. The ego loves big stories. It wants to be special. It wants to say, look what happened to me. It wants awakening to feel like winning the lottery or climbing a mountain so it can claim ownership and say, I achieved this. But the soul has no interest in achievement. The soul isn't trying to impress anyone. It simply wants you to come home, and home is quiet. Think about it. The most sacred places you've ever experienced were probably not loud. A small church in the middle of the week, a hospital room after visiting hours, a forest path early in the morning, a kitchen before everyone else wakes up. There is a certain stillness in those spaces that feels almost holy, even if you wouldn't use that word. Because in quiet spaces, something inside you softens. You stop performing. You stop pretending. You stop trying to be somebody. And what remains is just you. Raw, simple, real. But we rarely give ourselves permission to live there. Instead, we keep chasing noise. More news, more opinions, more arguments, more scrolling, more doing. We fill every empty space with sound because silence feels unfamiliar. And what's unfamiliar can feel scary. When it gets quiet, You start hearing your own thoughts. You start feeling old emotions. You start noticing the loneliness, or the grief, or the questions you've been running from for years. So we turn the volume back up. Television, phone, work, distraction, anything but stillness. Yet stillness is exactly where the truth waits. The deeper mind, the part of you that is connected to something far greater than personality, doesn't scream over the chaos. It doesn't compete with noise. It simply waits for you to slow down enough to hear it. It speaks the way nature speaks, not with commands, but with presence, like wind moving through trees, like waves folding onto the shore, like your own breathing late at night when the house is finally quiet. Have you noticed that the more noise there is in your life, the further you feel from yourself? When everything is loud, you forget what you actually feel. You forget what you truly want. You forget who you are, beneath all the roles you've been playing for decades. Parent, worker, provider, caretaker, problem solver, all necessary roles. Yes, but none of them are your essence. And when life gets too loud, those roles become so heavy that you start mistaking them for your identity. You don't say, "I am awareness having these experiences." You say, "I am stressed. I am tired. I am not enough." The noise pulls you away from your center. It's like standing too close to a speaker at a concert. The music is so loud you can't even recognize the melody anymore. It's just distortion. That's what the modern world feels like sometimes. Distortion. Constant stimulation. Constant urgency. Constant pressure to become more, do more, fix more. And in all that pressure, the gentle voice of the soul gets drowned out. But here's the beautiful part. It never disappears. It only waits. Waiting for a small gap, a quiet morning, a slow walk, a moment when you're too tired to keep pretending. And in that gap, you might suddenly feel something very subtle. Not excitement, not ecstasy, just a small sense of okayness. A simple feeling that, for this moment, nothing needs to be fixed. And it's so quiet you almost dismiss it. But that soft feeling, that's it. That's the whisper. Profound truth rarely arrives with drums and trumpets. It comes like a gentle breath brushing against your cheek, so light you could miss it if you weren't paying attention. And maybe that's why so many people overlook their own awakening, because they keep waiting for an explosion, while the miracle has always been happening in a whisper. 2. The ego is afraid of silence. There is something almost invisible that happens when life becomes quiet. And most people never talk about it because it feels too simple to be important. Yet it may be one of the most honest experiences you will ever have, and that is the moment when there is nothing left to do, nowhere to rush, no one to impress, and you are left sitting alone with yourself, without movement, without noise, without distraction, and for reasons you cannot quite explain, that stillness can feel heavier than any problem you face during the day. I remember discovering this not during meditation retreats or spiritual workshops, but on ordinary evenings, after long years of working, providing, trying to be strong for everyone around me, when the house would finally grow quiet, and the lights were dim, and there was no task left to complete. And instead of feeling peaceful like I thought I should, I felt restless, as if something inside me was pacing back and forth like a caged animal that had suddenly realized the door was closed. At first I thought something was wrong with me, because shouldn't silence feel relaxing? Shouldn't stillness feel like rest? And yet there was this subtle anxiety rising in my chest, this urge to turn on the television or scroll through my phone, or call someone just to hear a human voice. And it took me many years to understand that what I was trying to escape from was not loneliness or boredom, but the simple fact that without noise, I no longer knew who I was supposed to be. Because when everything becomes quiet, all the roles disappear. When the world stops asking things from you, you cannot hide inside the identity of the helper, the worker, the parent, the problem solver, the strong one, or the responsible one. And without those familiar masks, there is a strange emptiness that shows up, like a stage after the play has ended, and all the actors have gone home, leaving only the bare floor and the echo of footsteps. Most of us have spent decades living inside those roles so completely that we mistake them for our true self, and we say things like, "This is just who I am," without realizing that what we really mean is, "This is the character I learned to perform in order to survive." And as long as life stays busy, we never question it, because there is always another scene, another task, another conversation to keep the performance going. But silence ends the performance. Silence removes the audience. Silence takes away the script. And suddenly there is no story left to hold on to. There is no familiar sentence repeating inside your mind telling you who you are supposed to be. No constant narrative saying, I am this kind of person. I must do this. I should feel that. And without that inner narration, the ego begins to panic, because the ego is made entirely out of that story. The ego does not exist as something solid or permanent. It exists as movement, as thought, as commentary, as a continuous stream of mental noise that keeps labeling, judging, comparing, remembering, planning, worrying, and defending. And the moment that stream slows down, even a little, the structure of the ego begins to loosen like sand slipping through open fingers. In that way, the ego depends on thinking the way a fire depends on oxygen. And when thinking stops for even a brief moment, the ego feels like it is disappearing. And to the ego, that feels like death. Not physical death, of course, but something more subtle and perhaps more frightening. The death of control, the death of identity, the death of the familiar me that has been narrating your life for so long. I have come to see that this is why so many people are uncomfortable with meditation, or with quiet mornings, or even with simple walks alone without headphones. Because when there is nothing to distract the mind, the constant thinking machine slows down, and in that slowing down, the ego senses its own fragility, like a shadow that begins to fade when the light changes. Silence is like a small death for the ego, not violent or dramatic, but gentle and undeniable, like the way the sky slowly darkens at sunset until the colors you were so attached to simply dissolve into night, and the ego feels that dissolving and immediately tries to escape. And how does it escape? It escapes through busyness. It escapes through constant doing. It escapes through filling every empty space with something, anything, just to avoid that naked encounter with being. We tell ourselves we are being productive, responsible, efficient. But if we are honest, much of our busyness is simply fear in disguise. We check the phone again even though nothing important is there. We turn on background noise even when we are not listening. We add more tasks to a day that is already full. We volunteer to carry burdens that are not even ours. We keep moving, not because life truly requires it, but because stillness feels too unfamiliar, too exposing, too quiet. I used to think that my constant activity meant I was strong and disciplined, but later I realized that much of it was avoidance, a polite and socially acceptable way of running away from myself, because as long as I stayed busy, I never had to sit down and face the deeper questions that silence inevitably brings. Questions like, who am I without my achievements? Who am I without my past? Who am I if I stop trying to prove anything at all? That were counter. Those questions cannot be answered with logic or effort, and that frustrates the ego even more, because the ego only knows how to solve problems, and here is something that is not a problem to solve but a mystery to relax into. So it resists. It creates more noise. It keeps the mental conversation going from morning until night, and we end up exhausted without knowing why, carrying a tiredness that sleep alone cannot fix. Because what we are really tired from is not work, but the endless strain of maintaining a false identity. Yet beneath all that noise, something else has always been present. A quiet awareness, a simple sense of being. The part of you that does not need a role or a story or a title. The part that is still here even when everything else falls away. And the strange, beautiful truth is that when the ego fears silence, it is only because silence reveals that this deeper part has been here all along, untouched, unharmed, patiently waiting for you to notice it. So when you feel uncomfortable in stillness, when you feel that subtle urge to distract yourself, instead of judging it or trying to fix it, you might gently smile and recognize what is happening, because it simply means the old identity is loosening its grip and something more authentic is beginning to breathe. Not a new self, not a better self, just the real one. The one that was never noisy to begin with. The one that does not need to shout. The one that has always spoken in whispers. 3. Quantum science and the silent field of energy. There was a period in my life when the word silence sounded too poetic to trust, when anything that felt spiritual seemed vague and ungrounded. And I remember thinking that if something was true, it had to be practical, measurable, something you could point to with your hands and say, this is real, this is solid, this is not just imagination. And strangely enough, it was not a monastery or a meditation teacher that helped me understand stillness more deeply, but science itself, because the deeper I looked into the nature of reality, the more I realized that existence is built not on noise and force, but on something astonishingly quiet. When physicists began exploring matter at the smallest scales, they expected to find tiny, solid building blocks, like miniature stones that everything else was made from. But what they discovered instead was something far less tangible and far more mysterious. Because when you go beneath molecules and beneath atoms, and even beneath the particles we once thought were solid, what you actually find is not solidity at all, but movement, vibration, probability, and subtle waves of energy dancing in what looks like empty space. In other words, the world that feels so heavy and physical to our senses is, at its foundation, incredibly delicate and fluid. What you call your body, what you call this chair, what you call the walls around you, all of it is not truly solid in the way we were taught as children, but rather patterns of vibration, like music temporarily taking shape, like ripples forming images on the surface of water, here for a moment and then dissolving back into something invisible. And behind all those vibrations, scientists speak of a background field, a kind of unified energy field that exists everywhere at once, quiet, stable, containing within it every possible form that could ever arise. This field does not rush, it does not struggle, it does not make announcements, it simply is. And from that stillness, particles appear. From that stillness, stars are born. From that stillness, entire galaxies unfold. When I first understood this, not intellectually but intuitively, something inside me softened, because I realized that creation itself does not come from chaos or force, but from a deep, silent order that does not need to prove anything. Think about that for a moment in the most ordinary way. The entire universe, with all its complexity, with all its beauty, with all its life and color and sound, emerges from something fundamentally quiet, not from tension, not from effort, but from stillness. And then I began to look at my own life and noticed how differently I had been living. I had been trying to create everything through pressure, through pushing, through controlling outcomes, through thinking harder and planning harder, and forcing things to happen as if life were a stubborn machine that needed to be beaten into cooperation. I treated my mind like a factory and my heart like a tool, and the result was exhaustion. Because forcing is not the language of nature. Forcing is the language of fear. Nature does not force a flower to bloom. Nature does not force the sun to rise. Nature does not force the tide to return to the shore. There is a rhythm, a quiet intelligence, a kind of invisible harmony that allows things to unfold when conditions are aligned. And quantum science, in its own technical way, says the same thing. Reality emerges from coherence, from resonance, from alignment of energy, not from aggression. When waves move together, patterns form. When vibrations synchronize, structure appears. When there is harmony, matter organizes itself naturally. And when there is chaos, everything scatters. So in a very real sense, your life is not shaped only by what you do, but by the quality of the energy you are broadcasting, by the subtle frequency of your inner state. I know that word energy can sound abstract, but we experience it every day in simple human ways. You walk into a room and immediately feel tension without anyone saying a word. You sit next to someone calm and your body relaxes automatically. You meet a person who is rushing and anxious, and suddenly you feel rushed too. Nothing visible is exchanged, yet something is clearly transmitted. That something is vibration. That something is coherence or incoherence. And your inner world works the same way. When your mind is noisy and conflicted and constantly fighting reality, your energy is scattered, like a radio that cannot hold a clear signal. And from that scattered state you try to create a peaceful life, which is like trying to see your reflection in water that is being shaken by the wind. But when you become still, when you stop arguing with life for a moment, when you simply breathe and allow yourself to rest into the present, something begins to settle. Your thoughts slow, your body softens, your heart opens, your energy becomes more coherent, more ordered, more aligned. And from that alignment, new possibilities appear almost effortlessly, not because you force them into existence, but because you finally stopped interfering. It is similar to tuning an old radio. When the dial is slightly off, all you hear is static. You can hit the radio, shake it, curse at it, try to force the music to appear, but nothing works. Then, with one small, gentle adjustment, the signal locks in, and suddenly the music is clear and beautiful, and you realize the song was always there. You just weren't tuned to it. Stillness is that gentle adjustment. Stillness is how you tune yourself to life. From inner silence, clarity arises. From inner silence, intuition speaks. From inner silence, the right actions become obvious without struggle. I have lived both ways. I have lived the way of constant effort, where every step felt like dragging a heavy stone uphill, where even success tasted bitter because it cost too much. And I have lived the quieter way, where I began each day with a few moments of simple presence, where I stopped trying to control every outcome, where I allowed space between my thoughts, and strangely enough, life began to organize itself with a kind of grace I had never known before. Opportunities appeared naturally, conversations flowed more easily, solutions came without overthinking. It felt less like fighting the current and more like floating with it, not passive, not lazy, but deeply aligned, like rowing with the river instead of against it. So when we talk about awakening happening in stillness, this is not just spiritual poetry. It is practical. It is scientific in its own quiet way. Because just as particles arise from the silent field of energy, your new reality arises from the silent field within you. Not from strain, not from force, but from resonance. When your inner world becomes calm and coherent, the outer world begins to mirror that coherence back to you. And you start to understand something very simple and very humbling. Life was never asking you to push harder. Life was asking you to become quieter, so that you could finally hear the deeper intelligence that has been guiding you all along. 4. You do not become someone new. You simply stop resisting. There is a quiet misunderstanding that has followed many of us for most of our lives. And it is so deeply woven into the way we were raised that we rarely question it. And that misunderstanding is the belief that growth means adding something, that healing means acquiring something, that awakening means transforming yourself into a better, brighter, more impressive version of who you are today, as if enlightenment were another achievement to collect and place proudly on a shelf next to diplomas, promotions, and life milestones. For many years, I believed this without even realizing it, and I treated my inner life the same way I treated my career or my responsibilities, always trying to improve, always trying to fix, always trying to upgrade myself as if I were a broken machine that needed new parts. And even when I stepped onto a spiritual path, I carried that same mentality with me, reading more books, learning more techniques, practicing more methods, all with the hidden assumption that something essential was missing in me, and that one day, with enough effort, I would finally become whole. But here is the strange and humbling truth that only revealed itself after I was too tired to keep striving. Nothing was missing. Not then, not now, and not ever. Awakening did not add anything to me. It did not give me a new personality, or special powers, or some permanent state of bliss that erased all human struggles. What it did was far simpler and far less dramatic. It removed what was never me to begin with. It peeled away layers of tension I had been carrying for so long that I thought they were my natural shape. It loosened the tight grip I had on life. It softened the constant inner resistance that I didn't even know was there. It felt less like becoming someone new, and more like taking off a heavy coat I had been wearing through every season, forgetting that my own skin could breathe without it. When we are young, we learn to brace ourselves against the world. We learn to protect. We learn to defend. We learn to strive. We tighten our shoulders. We tighten our thoughts. We tighten our expectations. And little by little, this tightness becomes our normal state. We wake up already tense. We move through the day already prepared for battle. We interact with life as if everything must be controlled, managed, predicted, or fixed. Even when nothing is wrong, We still feel like something might go wrong, so we hold on tighter. Tighter to our plans, tighter to our identities, tighter to how things should be. And we call this strength, but it is not strength. It is resistance. It is like clenching your fist all day and then wondering why your hand hurts. And then one day, usually not during some grand spiritual event, but during an ordinary moment of exhaustion or surrender, something inside you quietly whispers, what if you stopped fighting for a while? Not giving up on life, not becoming passive, just loosening your grip. I remember sitting by a small lake once in the late afternoon, long after the crowds had gone home, and the water was completely still, so still that the sky reflected perfectly on the surface, clouds and trees and light blending together like a painting, and for a moment I could not tell where the lake ended and the sky began. And it struck me with a kind of gentle clarity that the lake had not created the sky. The lake did not have to manufacture the reflection. The lake simply stopped moving. That was enough. The sky was always there. The reflection appeared naturally when the disturbance ended. And something in my heart said, this is exactly what you have been doing to yourself for decades. You keep trying to create peace. You keep trying to manufacture clarity. You keep trying to build happiness through effort. But you are stirring the water constantly with your fears and expectations and control. And then you wonder why you cannot see the sky. We think awakening means adding the sky, but it is really about stopping the stirring. Nothing new is required, only the ending of unnecessary movement. When you stop resisting what is already here, something remarkable happens. Your natural intelligence begins to function again. Your intuition becomes clearer. Your body relaxes. Your breath deepens. And life begins to move through you with less friction. It feels less like pushing a car uphill and more like walking downhill with gravity gently carrying you forward. This does not mean life becomes perfect or free of challenges. It means you stop arguing with reality, because arguing with reality is where most of our suffering lives. We argue with what already happened. We argue with what people did years ago. We argue with how things should have been. We argue with aging, with change, with uncertainty, and all that arguing creates an inner tension that feels like being at war with the present moment. But the present moment always wins. It has already happened, so the fight only exhausts us. Awakening is when you quietly put down your weapons, not because you lost, but because you finally understand there was never an enemy. You begin to allow instead of force. You begin to trust instead of control. You begin to cooperate with life instead of wrestling it. And there is a kind of mature peace in that, not naive or dreamy, but grounded and real, the peace of someone who has tried everything else and discovered that gentleness works better than struggle. I often tell people that allowing is not weakness. Allowing is alignment. It is like opening your sail instead of rowing frantically with your hands. The wind was always there. The current was always moving. You simply stopped insisting on doing everything alone. So, if you ever feel like you are not there yet, like you have not become spiritual enough, or healed enough, or awakened enough, maybe you do not need to add one more practice or learn one more concept. Maybe you only need to notice where you are still bracing, where you are still clenching, where you are still trying to force life to obey you. And then, very gently, soften, not dramatically, not perfectly, just a little, like loosening your shoulders after a long day, like exhaling after holding your breath. Because awakening is not a construction project. It is a relaxation. It is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about finally allowing yourself to be ordinary and discovering that the ordinary has always been sacred. And when you stop resisting, when you stop stirring the water of your own mind, your true nature rises by itself, clear and simple and quietly luminous, as if it had been waiting patiently all along for you to step aside and let it be seen. 5. Small moments are quiet doors to something vast. There is a gentle irony that life keeps revealing to me as the years pass, and it is this strange reversal, where the moments I once ignored have become the ones that matter most, while the moments I once chased with all my strength now feel strangely empty, as if I had spent decades running after fireworks, only to discover that the real warmth was always coming from a small candle, burning steadily in the corner of the room. When I was younger, I thought meaning had to look important from the outside, so I filled my days with plans and goals and responsibilities, always believing that one day, after everything was accomplished, After everything was in order, after I had earned enough and proven enough, then I would finally sit down and rest and maybe pay attention to the quiet beauty of life. But that day kept moving further away like the horizon, always visible and never reachable. And it took me a long time to understand that peace was never waiting at the end of the road because it had been scattered gently along the road the entire time in the smallest and most ordinary moments. There is something deeply humbling about realizing that awakening does not always come while you are searching for it. And in fact, it rarely shows up when you are trying too hard, because effort creates tension, and tension narrows your vision, while awareness requires space and softness. So the more you chase awakening like an achievement, the more it slips through your fingers like water. But when you stop chasing and simply live, it begins to appear quietly in places you would never think to look. Sometimes it arrives when you are sitting alone at the kitchen table early in the morning with a simple cup of tea or coffee warming your hands, and the house is still half asleep and the world has not yet started demanding anything from you. And for a few minutes, there is nothing to fix and nothing to prove and nothing to become. And you just sit there feeling the warmth in your palms, watching a thin line of steam rising into the air, and without any grand revelation, you feel a small but undeniable sense of okayness, a quiet feeling that this moment, exactly as it is, does not need improvement. In the past, I would have rushed through that moment without noticing it, already thinking about the next task or the next problem. But now I see that these simple pauses are not empty at all. They are full in a way that words cannot quite capture. Full of presence, full of life, full of a kind of silent intelligence that only reveals itself when you are not trying to extract something from the moment. Other times it happens when sunlight falls through the window at a certain angle in the late afternoon, touching the floor or the wall in a way that makes even an ordinary room feel soft and golden, and you catch yourself staring at that light for no reason at all, as if something inside you recognizes a quiet beauty that your mind cannot explain. And for a brief instant, you are not thinking about your age, or your past, or your future. You are simply there, breathing, watching light dance on the surface of the world. And in that simple act of seeing without commentary, there is a stillness that feels deeper than any philosophy. These moments might seem insignificant to someone who is rushing through life, but to a heart that has been broken and healed a few times, to a mind that has tried and failed and tried again, they begin to feel sacred, not in a mystical or exaggerated way, but in a grounded and human way, like the feeling of coming home after a long journey and finally setting your bags down on the floor. I have also found that sometimes awakening sneaks in through sound, or rather through the absence of mental noise. When you step outside and hear the wind moving through trees, or the distant rhythm of waves, or even the quiet hum of a neighborhood settling into the evening. And for a moment you listen not with analysis but with your whole body, and you notice that the sound of the wind is far gentler than the sound of your thoughts, and something inside you naturally chooses the wind. It is a small shift, almost unnoticeable, but profound, because instead of listening to the endless commentary in your head, you begin listening to life itself. And life speaks much more softly, much more honestly, without arguments or judgments, just a steady presence that says you are here and that is enough. I used to think awakening required special conditions, like traveling to distant places, or spending hours in perfect meditation posture, or reading thick spiritual books. And while those things can be helpful in their own way, I slowly realized that life does not wait for perfect conditions to reveal truth, because truth is already woven into the fabric of the most ordinary experiences, and the only thing required is attention, not effort, not strain, just attention. And attention is a form of love. When you truly pay attention to something, whether it is your breath, or the taste of your tea, or the sound of birds in the distance, you are silently saying yes to this moment. You are allowing it to exist without trying to change it, and in that, allowing your nervous system relaxes, your mind softens, and the heavy sense of me begins to loosen. This is why small moments become great doors, because they ask nothing from you. They do not require you to be smarter, or stronger, or more spiritual. They simply invite you to be present, and presence is where the deeper field of awareness quietly waits. Over time, I have come to trust these small doorways more than any dramatic experience, because dramatic experiences come and go, But these gentle moments are always available, like little openings scattered throughout the day. And each time you step through one, even for a few breaths, you return to yourself. You return to something steady. You return to something real. And you begin to understand that awakening is not hiding somewhere far away. It is not a treasure buried at the end of a long search. It is closer than your own heartbeat, appearing again and again in the simplest scenes of your life. It often comes when you are not trying to find it at all, when you are too tired to chase and too honest to pretend, when you finally sit down and let the day be what it is, and in that surrender you notice a quiet peace that had been there all along, waiting patiently like an old friend who never left. So now, when I hold a warm cup in the morning or watch sunlight cross the floor, or listen to the wind moving through the trees, I no longer see these as small or meaningless things, because I know that within these ordinary moments, there is a doorway wide enough for the whole universe to enter, and all I have to do is slow down enough to walk through. 6. Healing happens in stillness. There is something I wish someone had told me much earlier in life, something so simple that my younger self probably would not have believed it, because like many people, I grew up thinking that healing required effort, that fixing myself meant working harder, analyzing deeper, pushing through pain with more discipline and more mental strength. And yet, after many years of trying to repair my life through force, I slowly discovered that the deepest healing never came when I was struggling. It came when I finally stopped struggling. For a long time, I treated my inner wounds the same way I treated problems at work, believing that if I could just think clearly enough and try hard enough, I could solve them like equations. So whenever sadness appeared, I tried to reason with it. Whenever fear showed up, I tried to fight it. Whenever old memories surfaced, I tried to dissect them piece by piece, as if understanding every detail would magically erase the pain. But all that effort only made me more tired, and strangely, the more I analyzed my suffering, the more solid it seemed to become, like mud that only thickens the more you stir it. Then life, in its quiet wisdom, began teaching me through my own body. There were periods when I was simply exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones and makes even simple tasks feel heavy, and during those times I had no energy left to fix anything. So I did the only thing I could do, which was lie down and sleep. And something very ordinary yet miraculous happened. While I was asleep, doing absolutely nothing, my body continued its work. My heart kept beating. My cells kept repairing themselves. My immune system kept restoring balance. Cuts healed, muscles recovered, inflammation reduced, all without my help. I was not directing anything. I was not thinking. I was not controlling. The body healed itself in the absence of effort. That realization stayed with me, because it contradicted everything I had been taught about control. The body does not heal when you are running and pushing and clenching. The body heals when you rest, when you lie down, when you allow, when you surrender to stillness. And one day, sitting quietly by myself after a particularly heavy chapter of life, it occurred to me that perhaps the mind works the same way. Perhaps the heart works the same way. Perhaps the soul works the same way. Maybe healing does not come from constant analysis. Maybe it comes from space. When we keep analyzing our emotional pain, we believe we are being responsible. But often we are just reopening the wound again and again, like someone who cannot stop touching a bruise to check if it still hurts. We replay old conversations. We replay mistakes. We replay betrayals. We keep telling the same story over and over, trying to understand why it happened, trying to find the perfect explanation, trying to make the past behave differently. But the past is finished. It does not need analysis. It needs gentleness. And gentleness rarely comes from thinking. It comes from allowing silence. I have noticed something very human over the years, especially in people who carry deep emotional scars. And that is the tendency to believe that if they stop thinking about their problems, they are somehow being careless or avoiding reality, as if constant mental activity were a sign of responsibility. But in truth, constant thinking is often just fear, wearing the mask of intelligence. We think we must stay alert to our pain or else something bad will happen. We think we must keep revisiting old memories or else we will lose control. But control has never healed a broken heart. Safety has. And safety is felt, not thought. This is where silence becomes medicine. When you sit quietly, without trying to solve yourself, without trying to improve yourself, without trying to figure everything out, your nervous system begins to receive a very different message. Instead of danger, it senses safety. Instead of urgency, it senses space. Instead of pressure, it senses permission. And the body responds immediately. Your shoulders drop, your breath slows, your heartbeat softens, your muscles unclench. You may not notice it at first, but something deep inside you begins to trust again. Modern science would describe this in terms of the nervous system shifting from survival mode into restoration mode. But you do not need scientific language to feel the difference, because you know it in your own experience. There is a way your body feels when you are stressed, tight, scanning the world for threats, and there is a very different way your body feels when you are sitting quietly on a porch at sunset with nothing to defend against. In the first state, healing is almost impossible. In the second state, healing happens naturally. It is like soil. If the ground is constantly shaken and disturbed, nothing can take root. But if the soil is left undisturbed, seeds begin to grow on their own. Silence is that undisturbed soil, and your emotional wounds are like seeds waiting for the right conditions to dissolve and transform. I have seen this in my own life in very subtle ways. There were pains I carried for years, disappointments I thought would never leave me, and yet when I stopped trying to fix them and simply allowed myself to sit quietly with them, without judgment and without analysis, something softened, not dramatically, not overnight, but slowly, like ice melting in warm sunlight. One day I realized that the memory no longer hurt the same way. The charge was gone, the story was still there, but the suffering had dissolved. And I could not point to any technique that caused it. It happened in stillness. It happened while walking slowly, while breathing, while watching the sky, while doing nothing special at all. It was as if the heart, given enough safety and silence, knew exactly how to reorganize itself without my interference. Energy, too, seems to follow this same quiet intelligence. When we are tense, our energy is scattered and blocked, like water trapped behind too many walls. But when we relax, when we stop resisting what we feel, that energy begins to flow again, balancing itself the way a river finds its own level without anyone directing it. Nothing is forced. Nothing is manipulated. Balance returns naturally. So now, when I speak about healing, I no longer speak about fighting or fixing or conquering your pain. I speak about resting, about allowing, about creating small islands of stillness in your day where you do not have to be strong or productive or wise, where you simply sit and let life breathe through you. Because healing is not something you manufacture. Healing is something you allow. Just like the body heals while you sleep, the heart heals while you are quiet. And the more you trust this quiet intelligence, the more you realize that life has been trying to heal you all along, waiting patiently for you to stop interfering long enough to let it do its gentle, invisible work. 7. Relaxation is a higher form of intelligence. There was a time in my life when I believed that everything valuable had to be earned through strain, that if I was not pushing, striving, calculating, and constantly doing something, then I was falling behind, and because of that belief, I lived for many years with a quiet tension inside my chest, a subtle tightness that never fully left me, as if my entire existence depended on how well I could hold the world together with my own hands. I thought effort was the same as strength. I thought control was the same as wisdom. I thought that if I just worked harder on myself, on my relationships, on my future, then life would finally reward me with peace. But what I did not realize back then was that this constant effort was not strength at all. It was fear in disguise. It was the fear that if I stopped doing, everything would collapse. It was the fear that if I let go, nothing good would remain. So I kept doing, I kept fixing, I kept planning. Even my spiritual journey became another project to manage, another problem to solve, another mountain to climb. I tried to improve myself into peace. I tried to earn my worthiness. I tried to force clarity. And the more I tried, the further away everything seemed. Peace felt distant. Love felt fragile. Joy felt temporary. It was like trying to calm water by hitting it harder. Then life, with a strange sense of humor, began teaching me through failure, Plans did not work out. People I tried to hold on to walked away. Opportunities I chased disappeared. And no matter how tightly I gripped, things kept slipping through my fingers. At first, this felt cruel, but later, I understood it as mercy, because slowly, very slowly, I became too tired to keep fighting. And in that tiredness, something unexpected happened. I relaxed, not because I was wise, not because I had mastered anything, but simply because I had no energy left to control life. And that moment, that quiet surrender, taught me more than all my years of effort. I began to see that many of the most beautiful things in my life had never come from force. They came when I stopped trying so hard. Friendships formed naturally when I stopped trying to impress. Love deepened when I stopped trying to be perfect. Ideas appeared when I stopped chasing inspiration. Solutions came while I was walking or showering or staring out the window, not when I was sitting at a desk clenching my jaw. It was as if life waited for me to step aside before it could finally move. There is a simple image that has stayed with me over the years. Imagine holding a handful of sand. If you tighten your fist, the sand slips out through the gaps between your fingers. The harder you squeeze, the less you keep. But if you open your palm and relax your hand, the sand simply rests there. Nothing is forced. Nothing is lost. Life is like that sand. Relationships are like that sand. Even happiness is like that sand. The more you clutch, the more you lose. The more you relax, the more remains. And yet we are rarely taught this. We are taught that success requires struggle. We are taught that worth comes from effort. We are taught that if we are not constantly doing something, we are wasting time. So we live with tight shoulders, shallow breath, and minds that never stop racing, wondering why peace feels so far away. But peace does not respond to force. Peace responds to permission. There is a quiet intelligence in relaxation that the mind does not easily understand. When you relax deeply, you are not being lazy. You are not giving up. You are not becoming passive. You are actually aligning yourself with something much wiser than personal willpower. You are aligning with the natural flow of life itself. Think about your heartbeat. You do not force it. Think about your breath. You do not manage every inhale. Think about the way a wound closes, or a tree grows, or the sun rises. None of these happen through strain. They happen through an effortless order that is already built into existence. Why would your life be any different? Why would your path require constant struggle when everything else in nature moves with such quiet ease? I began to understand that relaxation is not the absence of intelligence, but a higher form of it. It is the intelligence of trust. The intelligence that knows you do not have to micromanage the universe. The intelligence that recognizes that not everything needs your interference. The intelligence that allows space for something greater to guide the process. When you relax, you are saying to life, I trust you. When you soften your grip, you are saying, I do not need to control every outcome. And strangely, that trust creates better results than all your previous efforts combined. Because when you are relaxed, you see more clearly. When you are relaxed, you listen better. When you are relaxed, your actions come from clarity instead of fear. And actions born from clarity are always more effective than actions born from tension. I have noticed that whenever I make decisions from anxiety, they usually lead to more complications. But when I wait, breathe, and allow myself to settle into stillness first, the right step often reveals itself naturally, almost effortlessly, as if it had been waiting for me to calm down before showing up. It feels less like forcing life forward and more like cooperating with something already moving, like stepping into a river instead of trying to drag the river behind you. There is deep wisdom in that cooperation, a wisdom the soul understands, even when the mind does not. The mind wants guarantees. The soul wants flow. The mind wants control. The soul wants trust. And trust is not dramatic. It is very ordinary. It looks like taking a slow walk without rushing. It looks like pausing before reacting. It looks like letting a conversation unfold without trying to dominate it. It looks like resting when you are tired instead of pushing through. These small acts of relaxation may seem insignificant, but they are actually doors into a different way of living. A way that feels lighter, kinder, more human. Over time, I realized that letting go was not losing anything real. What left was never meant to stay. What stayed did not need to be forced. and what truly belonged to me always found its way back without struggle. That is when I understood something very simple and very freeing. Relaxation is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is the quiet confidence that life is not against you. It is the gentle knowing that you do not have to fight every moment. It is the soul's way of saying, "You can rest now. I will carry you." And when you finally trust that voice, when you finally loosen your grip and open your hand, you may discover that everything you were chasing has been walking beside you all along, waiting patiently for you to stop trying so hard and simply allow it to stay. 8. Presence is the only doorway to awakening. There was a long period in my life when I believed that understanding would come from thinking more, planning further ahead, and revisiting the past with greater precision, as if somewhere inside all that mental movement there was a hidden key that would finally unlock peace. And so I spent years walking back and forth across the corridors of memory and imagination, replaying old conversations, rewriting old mistakes, rehearsing future scenarios, trying to secure a life that had not even happened yet, while the only place where life was actually unfolding kept being quietly ignored beneath my feet. I lived in yesterday and tomorrow so completely that today felt like a narrow hallway I rushed through without looking around. The past seemed heavy and important, full of stories about who I had been, what I had done right, what I had done wrong, who had hurt me, and who I thought I had become because of those experiences, and without realizing it, I carried those memories like stones in a backpack, convinced that they defined me, convinced that without them, I would not know who I was, even though they were nothing more than fading images playing inside the theater of the mind. And the future, which did not even exist yet, somehow felt even more powerful, because it was filled with hope and fear at the same time, filled with everything I thought I needed to fix or achieve or avoid. And so my thoughts kept stretching forward like anxious hands, trying to grab something that was not there, always preparing, always predicting, always worrying, as if life were a problem that had to be solved before it arrived. But one day, after too much exhaustion and too many sleepless nights, I noticed something very simple that changed everything. Neither the past nor the future had any physical substance. I could not touch them. I could not stand inside them. I could not breathe in them. They existed only as thoughts. Memories were thoughts. Expectations were thoughts. Regrets were thoughts. Plans were thoughts. And thoughts, no matter how convincing, were still just movements of the mind, like clouds drifting across a vast sky. Meanwhile, there was something else that did not drift, something that did not come and go, something that did not belong to yesterday or tomorrow, something that was here, steady and quiet, like the ground beneath my feet. This moment, this breath, this simple sense of being alive right now. At first it sounded almost too obvious, almost childish, like something you would read on a greeting card. But the more I paid attention, the more I realized that it was the most overlooked truth of all. Only this moment is real, not philosophically, not poetically, but literally. You can remember yesterday, but you cannot step back into it. You can imagine tomorrow, but you cannot live there. You can only ever experience life here. And here is always now. It amazed me how much suffering came from resisting this simple fact. Whenever I was anxious, I was in the future. Whenever I was guilty or bitter, I was in the past. Whenever I was at peace, even for a few seconds, I was simply here. No story, no timeline, just the direct experience of breathing, hearing, seeing, existing. It felt almost too quiet for the mind to value. The mind prefers drama. It prefers complicated explanations and grand transformations. But presence is incredibly ordinary. It feels like washing the dishes and actually feeling the warm water on your hands. It feels like sitting in a chair and noticing the weight of your body. It feels like listening to someone speak without preparing your reply. Nothing mystical, nothing spectacular. And yet, inside that ordinariness, there is an extraordinary stillness. I began to notice that when I was completely here, even for a brief moment, my thoughts slowed down naturally. Not because I forced them to stop, not because I fought them, but because they simply had nothing to feed on. Thoughts need time. They need past and future. They need stories. But presence has no story. Presence is just this. And in that simplicity, the mind quietly loses its grip. There were moments when I would sit alone, perhaps early in the morning before the world woke up, and instead of meditating in any complicated way, I would just sit and listen to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of birds, the rhythm of my own breath, and without trying to achieve anything, something inside me would soften. The constant narrator in my head would grow quiet. The need to become someone would fade, and what remained was not emptiness in a cold sense, but a gentle fullness, like coming home after a long journey and finally putting your bags down. In those moments, I was not thinking about who I was. I simply was, and strangely, that felt more real than any identity I had ever constructed. When thought pauses, even slightly, something deeper becomes noticeable. Not something you can see or describe clearly, but a sense of being that has always been there. A quiet awareness, a silent presence that watches everything without effort. It does not judge, it does not rush, it does not compare, it simply knows. I began to understand that this awareness is what I truly am, not the endless stream of thoughts about my life. Thoughts change constantly. Emotions rise and fall. Roles come and go. But this simple awareness remains. It was there when I was a child. It is here now. It will still be here no matter what happens. And touching that awareness, even briefly, feels like touching something timeless. That is when I realized that awakening is not about adding new beliefs or collecting spiritual concepts or becoming a more impressive version of yourself. It is about returning to this quiet presence that has never left. It is about noticing what is already here beneath the noise. It is about relaxing out of the mind and sinking gently into the immediacy of life. Many people think awakening must be dramatic, filled with visions or fireworks or sudden revelations. But in my experience, it is much softer than that. It is so soft that you can miss it if you are looking for something extraordinary. It feels like a simple pause between thoughts, like a small gap of silence, like the space between two breaths. And yet inside that small gap there is immense peace. Because in that gap, you are not carrying the past. You are not chasing the future. You are not trying to fix yourself. You are simply here. And here, nothing is missing. I have learned that whenever I feel lost or overwhelmed, I do not need a complicated solution. I just need to come back. Back to the body, back to the breath, back to the sounds around me, back to this simple moment. And every time I return, it feels like stepping through a quiet doorway that was always open. A doorway that does not lead somewhere else, but leads deeper into what already is. Presence is that doorway, not one among many, not a technique, not a philosophy, but the only place where life truly happens, because awakening cannot happen in the past. It cannot happen in the future. It can only happen now, and now is always waiting, patient and gentle, like an old friend sitting beside you, saying nothing, asking nothing, simply inviting you to stop running and finally rest in the truth that you have never been separate from this moment, and that this moment has always been enough. 9. The signs you are awakening, even if you do not realize it. There is a quiet kind of transformation that does not announce itself with trumpets or fireworks. A transformation so gentle that most people walk right past it without noticing. And if you had asked me years ago what awakening would look like, I would have painted you a dramatic picture filled with sudden revelations and life-changing decisions and some grand moment where everything finally made sense. Yet what actually happened was so ordinary and so subtle that at first I mistook it for nothing at all. I used to think growth had to feel intense. I believed healing would be loud. I assumed enlightenment would arrive like lightning splitting the sky. But what really changed me felt more like the slow melting of ice at the end of winter. Something you barely see happening until one morning you notice the river is flowing again. Awakening, in my experience, does not feel like becoming someone new. It feels like becoming less reactive, less heavy, less entangled. It feels like life slowly loosening its grip around your throat. And because we are conditioned to look for big signs, we often overlook these small mercies. We overlook the quiet evidence that something deep inside us has already shifted. One of the first things I noticed, though I did not have words for it at the time, was that I reacted less than before, as if the emotional storms that once swept me away had begun to lose their force, and situations that would have ruined an entire day now passed through me like a breeze moving through an open window, still noticeable but no longer destructive. In the past, A single comment could wound me for hours. A small inconvenience could turn into a story of injustice. Someone's bad mood could become my burden. It was as if every little thing hooked into me and pulled me around like a puppet. But gradually, without any heroic effort, there was more space between the world and my response. Something would happen, and instead of exploding, or defending, or overthinking, I would simply pause. Not because I was suppressing anything, not because I was pretending to be calm, but because the urgency just was not there anymore. It felt as though life had slowed down inside me, as though there was a cushion of silence between the event and my reaction. And in that cushion, I could breathe. That breath changed everything. I began to understand that when you are awakening, you do not become colder or indifferent. You simply stop fighting every wave. You stop taking everything personally. You realize that most things are just movements of energy passing through, and you no longer need to build an identity around each one. Another gentle sign appeared in a way that almost made me laugh when I finally saw it clearly, because I used to feed on drama without even knowing it, like someone addicted to noise who calls it excitement, and I would unconsciously seek out complicated situations, intense conversations, emotional highs and lows, as if peace were boring and chaos were proof that I was alive. But over time, that appetite faded. I did not crave arguments anymore. I did not feel the need to prove myself right. I did not feel drawn to gossip or emotional turbulence. It was not a moral decision. It was not discipline. It was simply exhaustion with unnecessary suffering. Drama started to feel heavy, loud, artificial, like wearing clothes that no longer fit, and quiet evenings at home, which once felt lonely or unproductive, began to feel like a gift. I started choosing simplicity without even thinking about it. Simple food, simple conversations, simple days. And strangely, those simple days felt fuller than all the chaotic ones I used to chase. It was as if my nervous system had finally learned that it was safe to rest. There was also something else that surprised me, something many people misunderstand, and that is the growing love for solitude. Not the kind that comes from isolation or sadness, but the kind that feels like sitting with an old friend who understands you completely without words. I used to be afraid of being alone. Silence felt like emptiness. I needed constant company, constant distraction, constant background noise to avoid facing myself. But slowly, being alone became peaceful. I could sit in a room by myself and not feel the urge to escape. I could take a walk without headphones and simply listen to the wind. I could drink tea and watch the light move across the wall and feel perfectly content. There was no loneliness in those moments, because loneliness comes from disconnection from yourself. And when you begin to reconnect with your own presence, solitude stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like home. It is a strange paradox that the more comfortable you are with yourself, the less you demand from the world to entertain you. You no longer need people to fill the silence. You no longer need constant validation. You simply enjoy sharing space when it happens naturally. And when you are alone, you are still whole. Gratitude also begins to grow in ways that are almost childlike, not forced or practiced like a technique, but spontaneous and quiet, like catching yourself smiling at something small for no reason at all. I remember standing by a window one morning, watching sunlight fall across the kitchen floor, noticing the dust floating in the air like tiny stars, and feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with achievement or success, just a simple appreciation for being alive to witness that moment. Nothing special had happened, no miracle, no breakthrough, just light on the floor. And yet it felt sacred. When you are awakening, you start to notice these tiny things more. The taste of water, the sound of birds, the way your body relaxes into a chair. Things you ignored for decades suddenly feel precious. Not because you are trying to be positive, but because your attention has returned to the present, and the present is full of quiet beauty we usually overlook. Perhaps the most mysterious sign of all, the one that convinced me something deep had truly changed, was a peace that had no logical reason, a calm that did not depend on circumstances, a soft okayness that remained even when life was imperfect. Problems still existed, bills still needed to be paid, people still misunderstood me sometimes. Nothing outside was magically fixed. And yet, underneath it all, there was a steady current of calm. Not excitement, not euphoria, just peace. like the bottom of the ocean that remains still even when waves crash on the surface. I could feel sadness sometimes. I could feel frustration sometimes, but they did not define me anymore. They passed through, and something deeper stayed untouched. This kind of peace cannot be manufactured. You cannot force it. You cannot think your way into it. It arrives when resistance softens. It arrives when you stop arguing with life. It arrives when you finally lay down the heavy armor you have been wearing for years. Looking back now, I realize these were the real signs of awakening. Not visions, not dramatic changes, but gentleness, less reaction, less drama, more comfort with solitude, more gratitude for small things, and a quiet peace with no explanation. If you recognize these in yourself, even a little, then something beautiful is already happening inside you. Not loudly, not spectacularly, but deeply, like roots growing underground where no one can see. And sometimes, the most profound transformations are the ones that make the least noise, because truth does not shout. It simply rests in the heart, steady and warm, waiting for you to notice that you have already come home. 10. Becoming the space, not the content. There is a gentle shift that happens on this path that almost no one talks about. Not because it is rare, but because it is so simple that the mind keeps overlooking it. And this shift does not come with fireworks or visions or some dramatic spiritual identity, but instead arrives like a quiet dawn that slowly brightens the room while you are still half asleep. And only later do you realize that the darkness you were so used to has already dissolved without asking for your permission or effort. For most of our lives, we are taught, in very subtle ways, to believe that we are the content of our experience, which means we believe we are our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, our roles, our successes, and even our wounds, and so we spend years trying to rearrange this content into something more acceptable, more lovable, more worthy, as if awakening were a project of self-improvement, where we polish the personality until it finally shines enough to deserve peace. I lived that way for a long time, constantly trying to fix myself like an old machine that always seemed to have one more broken part, reading more books, analyzing every childhood memory, correcting every flaw, chasing the next method that promised clarity. And yet beneath all that effort there was a quiet exhaustion, because no matter how much I adjusted the surface of my life, something inside still felt heavy, still felt incomplete, still felt like it was running on a treadmill that never truly stopped. It was only when I grew tired of trying to become someone better that something softer began to reveal itself. Not as a new achievement, but as a simple recognition. And that recognition was this: perhaps I am not the content at all. Perhaps I am not the thoughts that come and go, not the emotions that rise and fall, not the stories that keep rewriting themselves every year, but something far more stable and far more spacious that has been here quietly watching the whole time. If you sit very still and observe your own mind with patience, not with judgment but with curiosity, you may begin to notice that thoughts behave like passing visitors, arriving unannounced and leaving just as quickly, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, sometimes wise, sometimes completely irrational. And yet, no matter what they say, there is always something in you that is aware of them, something that sees them appear and disappear like clouds drifting across a wide sky. And when you notice this clearly, not as a theory but as a living experience, you start to understand that you cannot be the thought itself, because the thought is something you can observe, and the observer and the observed are never the same, which means that what you truly are must be the awareness that witnesses the thought rather than the thought that briefly passes through. The same is true for emotions, even though emotions often feel more convincing and more physical, because when sadness comes, it can feel like your whole body is made of stone, and when fear comes, it can feel like your chest is tightening around your heart, and when joy comes, it can feel like sunlight pouring through every cell. And yet, if you look carefully, you will see that even these powerful waves are still movements happening inside a larger field of awareness that remains quietly present no matter what emotion is moving through. I remember a period in my life when grief sat with me for months like an unwelcome guest, and I thought that grief was who I had become. I thought I was a broken person, a damaged story, a heavy heart that would never feel light again. But one evening, as I sat alone in the dim light of the room, too tired to fight anything anymore. I noticed that even though grief was there, something in me was simply watching it. Something untouched, something silent, something that did not suffer in the same way. And that silent presence felt more like me than the grief ever did. That was the first time I sensed the difference between content and space. The grief was content. The thoughts about loss were content. The tightness in the chest was content. But the quiet awareness that noticed all of it was space. And strangely, the space did not hurt. The space was open, gentle, and steady, like the sky holding a storm without being damaged by the rain. As this understanding deepened, life began to feel lighter in a very natural way. Not because my problems disappeared, or because I suddenly became positive all the time, but because I stopped identifying so completely with every passing experience, and instead of saying this anger is me or this fear is me, there was a softer recognition that anger is happening and fear is moving through, which created a small but powerful distance that allowed everything to breathe. From that distance came compassion, because when you are no longer fighting your inner weather, you stop blaming yourself for every cloud, and you stop trying to repair yourself as if you were fundamentally flawed, and you begin to see that nothing inside you is a mistake, that thoughts are just thoughts, emotions are just energies, and you are the vast field that allows all of them to come and go. This is why awakening is not about fixing yourself, because the one who tries to fix is usually just another thought pretending to be in control. And every attempt to force change often creates more tension, more resistance, more subtle violence against your own being, whereas simple allowing, simple presence, simple resting, as awareness has a healing quality that no effort can imitate. When you stop trying to correct every imperfection and instead sit quietly like the open sky, something extraordinary happens in a very ordinary way. Because emotions complete their cycle without getting stuck, thoughts lose their authority, and the nervous system begins to feel safe enough to relax. As if the body finally understands that it no longer has to defend an imaginary self all the time. Living as space does not mean becoming passive or indifferent, and it does not mean you stop caring about life, but rather it means you act without the heavy burden of identity, you speak without the constant need to protect an image, you love without clinging, and you move through the world with a quiet trust that you do not have to control every detail for things to unfold correctly. It feels less like struggling upstream and more like floating with the current, less like holding your breath and more like finally exhaling after years of tension. And in that exhale, there is a simple peace that has nothing to do with circumstances and everything to do with recognizing what you have always been. So when I say become the space and not the content, I am not offering a philosophy or a technique, but pointing towards something you can verify for yourself right now. Something so close that it is easy to miss, which is the silent awareness reading these words, the quiet presence behind your eyes, the open field in which every sensation, every memory, every thought appears and disappears. Rest there gently, like the sky that never chases the clouds and never resists the rain, and you may discover that you were never meant to repair yourself or reinvent yourself at all, because what you truly are has never been damaged, never been lacking, and never needed improvement. It has only been waiting patiently for you to stop chasing the content long enough to remember the vast, peaceful space that has always been your real home. A final whisper. As we gently arrive at the closing of this journey together, I want to speak to you the way an old friend would speak at the end of a long evening, when the room has grown quiet and the lights are soft and there is nothing left to prove, because the deepest truths rarely need dramatic words and are usually carried inside the simplest sentences. And if there is anything life has taught me, after years of searching through noise, ambition, success, failure, loss, and rebuilding, it is that awakening is not a climb towards some distant peak, but a quiet return to the place you never actually left. For a very long time, I believed that spiritual growth meant going somewhere else, becoming someone better, reaching a higher state that other people had not yet reached, and I treated my inner life like a ladder that I had to keep climbing step after step, always improving, always correcting, always pushing forward. Because I thought peace was waiting at the top like a reward for effort, and without realizing it, I turned my own soul into a project that needed constant fixing. That way of living looks admirable from the outside, but inside it feels like endless tension, because every day carries the subtle message that you are still incomplete, and still behind, and still not enough as you are. And when you live under that message for too many years, even spirituality becomes another form of pressure, another race, another reason to judge yourself. What finally changed me was not a breakthrough or a vision or some special mystical event, but something much quieter and much more human. Because one day, I simply became tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep can cure, but the kind of tired that comes from striving for decades, the kind of tired that makes you sit down on the edge of the bed and stare at the wall and wonder why you have been running for so long without ever feeling like you arrived. And in that tiredness, something softened. I stopped trying so hard. I stopped chasing the next method. I stopped asking what else I needed to add to myself. And for the first time, I just sat there with nothing to solve, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. And in that simple sitting, I felt a quiet presence that had always been there, waiting patiently beneath all my effort. It felt strangely familiar, like returning to a childhood home after many years away and realizing that the door had never been locked, that all the time you thought you were lost, you were only walking in circles around a place that had always belonged to you. That is when I understood something that words can barely capture, which is that awakening is not about climbing to the top of a mountain, but about sitting down on the ground and recognizing that the sky has always been above you, and the earth has always been holding you, and there was never anywhere else you truly needed to go. We imagine enlightenment like a summit, like a heroic ascent, like something only a few special people can reach. But perhaps it is much simpler than that. Perhaps it is more like coming home after a long day and taking off your shoes and feeling the floor beneath your feet. Ordinary and quiet and completely enough. I often think of the sun when I speak about this, because the sun does not disappear when the sky is covered with clouds, and it does not fight the clouds or argue with them or try to shine harder to prove itself. It simply remains where it has always been, steady and warm and constant, while the clouds move according to their own nature and eventually drift away. In the same way, your true being has never disappeared. Your peace has never been destroyed. Your wholeness has never been broken. Only the clouds of thought and fear and memory have passed in front of it for a while, creating the illusion of darkness. And so awakening is not about creating the sun. It is about allowing the clouds to thin out on their own. It is about no longer identifying with every passing storm. It is about trusting that clarity returns naturally when you stop stirring the sky. Right now, as you listen or read these words, you do not need to understand anything complicated, and you do not need to adopt any new belief, because this is not about philosophy, but about direct experience. And I want to gently invite you to try something very simple, something so small that the mind might call it insignificant, yet something that has the power to open a quiet doorway inside you. Pause for a moment. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of your body where you are sitting. Notice the natural rhythm of your breathing without trying to control it. Sense the air touching your skin. Listen to whatever sounds are around you. And as you do this, see if you can notice that life is already happening without your effort. That breathing is happening. That the heart is beating. That awareness is present. And all of it is unfolding on its own, without you having to force anything. In this simple moment, nothing is missing. There is nothing you need to achieve. There is no higher state you must reach before you are allowed to rest. There is no future version of you that is more worthy of peace than the one who is here right now. The mind may still whisper that you should be further along, or more healed, or more enlightened, but those whispers are just old habits, old echoes from a culture that worships achievement and forgets being. Beneath those whispers, there is a deeper silence that asks nothing from you. That silence does not demand improvement. It does not compare you with anyone else. It does not measure your progress. It simply holds you, the way the ocean holds a floating leaf, effortlessly and without judgment. If I could sit across from you in person, I would not give you more instructions or more techniques, because you already have everything you need. And instead, I would probably just smile and say that perhaps the most sacred thing you have ever searched for was never hiding in some distant future or in some special experience, but has been waiting quietly inside the stillness you keep overlooking. So before we part, allow yourself to rest here for just a breath longer. Allow yourself to soften the old habit of striving. Allow yourself to feel how close peace actually is, and remember this gentle truth that has carried me through many dark nights and many uncertain mornings, which is that maybe the most sacred thing you have ever been seeking is not somewhere far away at all, but is patiently waiting for you in this very silence.